Mom defends my sister for stealing from me and tries to send me to military school. When I was 14, about a year before my parents' marriage officially fell apart, something happened that I still cannot shake off. My younger sister, Megan, was the golden child in the house. She always spent her allowance as soon as she got it on makeup, snacks at the mall, video games, or trendy clothes. Meanwhile, my dad made sure I earned every dollar of my allowance by doing household chores or yard work. Megan, on the other hand, rarely lifted a finger unless Dad was right there telling her what to do. And Mom? She never asked Megan to do anything, aside from occasionally cleaning her room. To save for a scooter, I went above and beyond. I mowed lawns for neighbors, collected cans to redeem for cash, and took on odd jobs around the neighborhood. Over 2 years, I had painstakingly saved almost $2,000. But holding on to that money was not easy, thanks to Megan. She had a knack for finding my hiding spots and thought nothing of taking my hard-earned cash. One day, I noticed $100 was missing. I confronted her right away. "Hey, Megan," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Did you take my money again?" "What?" she replied, eyes wide. "No. Of course not." She stammered a bit, her tell whenever she was lying. "You're a terrible liar," I shot back. "I know you took it. My savings were at $X yesterday, and now they're $Y. It's missing, and it's not a coincidence." "Leave me alone," she yelled, starting to tear up. Megan always played the victim when she was cornered. She stormed off, bawling, straight to Mom. "Mommy! He's being mean to me," she wailed loud enough for me to hear down the hall. I followed after her, not letting this go. "She stole from my savings again," I told Mom. Mom, predictably, snapped at me. "Shut it, Jake. Can't you see Megan's upset? She said she didn't take it, and that's the end of it. If you don't let this go, I'll ground you." I stared at her in disbelief. "I know she did it. If you won't do anything, I'll just ask Dad to handle it." "Oh, there's no need for that," she replied sharply. "Besides, where's your proof? You don't have any." "Actually, I do," I said, holding my ground. "I keep a ledger. I write down every dollar I add or spend. 3 days ago, the total was $X. Now it's $Y. $100 is missing. Megan's done this before, and you know it. She's already blown through her allowance this month, and yet you took her shopping yesterday. Where do you think she got the money for that, huh?" Mom froze for a second, then scowled. "You know what? You're grounded. Go to your room before I get the belt." I knew better than to argue further. In our house, knowing when to stop was a survival skill. I turned around, walked to my room, and slammed the door. Once inside, I grabbed my old brick Nokia cell phone and called Dad at work. He didn't answer, so I left a detailed voicemail explaining everything. About an hour later, Dad called back. "I'll take care of it," he assured me. Not long after, I heard Mom shouting at him over the landline in the kitchen. I didn't catch much, but she was clearly trying to defend Megan. At one point, I heard her yell, "Fine. If he's so upset, you can pay him back yourself, because it's already spent." A few minutes later, Mom barged into my room, fuming. "I can't believe you snitched on me," she screamed. "After everything I do for you, you couldn't just let a little money slide? So, you admit Megan took it?" I asked calmly. Mom's face twisted into a sneer. "What if she did? Girls need more money than boys. You should be giving it to her anyway. It's not even that much." "It's not just a little money, and you know it," I fired back. "She stole $100. Even if it was $1, it'd still be wrong. You wouldn't like it if someone took money out of your purse. She's guilty, and you're making excuses for her." She doesn't need excuses. Mom shot back. Megan is a princess and deserves to be treated like one. Well, that's not my problem, I said, standing my ground. She can be a princess somewhere else, away from my stuff. That pushed Mom over the edge. That's it, you little brat, she screamed. I'm going to teach you a lesson. She lunged toward me, ready to swing, but I stood tall. By then, I was as tall as her and stronger from all the outdoor work I did. I locked eyes with her. Go ahead, I said. Try it. I didn't do anything wrong, and you know it. Mom froze, her arm mid-swing. She stood there, trembling with rage, then let out a frustrated scream. She swung her arm wildly, trying to knock something off my dresser, but hit the edge of it instead. She winced, clutching her hand, before storming out of my room. As she stomped down the hall and stairs, I could hear her yelling and slamming things around. That night, I knew I had struck a nerve and that Dad would be hearing about this too. As Mom stormed down the hallway, her yelling and fist-pounding echoed throughout the house. I heard her make her way into the kitchen, where she did what she always did when things did not go her way, pulled out a bottle of wine from the fridge and started drinking. Meanwhile, Megan peeked out from her bedroom door. Her eyes were wide, and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. The moment our eyes met, she slammed her door shut and disappeared. Mom had always been Megan's shield, the one who let her get away with everything, but it felt like that dynamic was finally starting to shift. Later that evening, Dad came home from work. It did not take long for him to piece together what had happened. He dragged Megan into my room and stood her in front of me. Tell him the truth, he said firmly. Megan squirmed, avoiding my gaze. At first, she mumbled something under her breath, barely audible. Dad raised his voice. Speak up. Loud and clear. Finally, she snapped, fine. I took it, okay? I took it. Her face was red, not from guilt but from being forced to admit it. Dad handed me $100 to replace the money she had stolen and turned to Megan. You're grounded for a week. This will come out of your allowance. That was the breaking point for her. Megan burst into tears, screaming about how unfair he was in calling him the worst dad ever. She ran back to her room and slammed the door behind her. Mom, of course, was nowhere to be found during all of this. She was outside on the back patio, sipping her wine as though nothing had happened. She never apologized or even acknowledged what Megan had done. Worse, when Megan's next allowance came around, Mom handed it to her anyway, overriding Dad's punishment. A few days later, Dad took me to a local store on his day off and bought me a combination safe. It was a small but sturdy box where I could keep my money and anything else I did not want Megan to get her hands on. We did not tell Mom or Megan about it. I set the combination to a 4-digit code, if I recall, it was 4962, and tucked the safe in the back of my closet. For the first time, I felt like I had some peace of mind. That did not last long. A few weeks later, after I had finished mowing some lawns for neighbors, I came home to find my room in complete disarray. Everything was scattered: books, clothes, papers. It looked like someone had gone through every drawer and shelf. I immediately called Mom to confront her about it. Your little angel did it again, I told her. Mom's voice was sharp on the other end of the line. Megan would never do such a thing. Stop accusing her. Well, if she didn't do it, then who did? I asked. You? Because it was just fine when I left. Caught off guard, she hesitated before snapping, fine. Maybe she did. But so what? You probably deserved it for not being nicer to her. I hung up and left a message for Dad at work, explaining what had happened. Then I went to Megan's room to confront her directly. Before she could even try to deny it, I told her, you can tear my room apart all you want, but you're not getting to my money. It's locked in a safe now. That sent her into a full-blown tantrum. She screamed at the top of her lungs, slamming doors and stomping around like a child. Mom, naturally, came to her defense, but I did not bother engaging. I returned to my room and started cleaning up the mess. Nothing was missing or broken yet. The next day, though, I came home to find my room in even worse condition. This time, the window was shattered. Megan had thrown the safe out of it in a fit of rage because she could not get it open. Furious, I called Dad again. When he and Mom got home that evening, Megan owned up to it without a shred of remorse. "Yeah, I did it," she said, arms crossed defiantly, as if daring him to punish her. Mom immediately jumped to her defense. "Well, if he hadn't gotten that stupid safe, this wouldn't have happened," she argued. That was the last straw for Dad. "The safe was necessary because I am sick of her stealing from her brother," he yelled. "Every time she does this, I am the one paying him back because you refuse to take responsibility." The shattered window had to be replaced, and Dad went a step further. He installed a deadbolt on my door and mounted a small lockbox next to it for the key. Only I knew the combination to the lockbox. Megan's grounding was extended to a month, but even then, Mom continued letting her do whatever she wanted when Dad was not home. By the end of her grounding, Megan resorted to begging me for money every time she ran out of allowance. I stood firm, refusing to give her a dime. To make a point, I even drew up a simple IOU and told her to sign it in front of Dad if she wanted to borrow anything. Predictably, she tore it in half and ran crying to Mom about how mean I was being. Mom, of course, took her side. "Just give her the money, Jake," she demanded. "Not without a signed IOU," I replied calmly. "You're just like your father," she snapped. "Always needing a paper trail for everything." And with that, I walked back to my room, locking the door behind me. I had learned by then that there was no point in arguing. Mom and Megan were relentless in trying to get me to hand over money to my sister, but I had finally drawn the line. Anytime Megan came begging, I reminded her of Dad's rules and that I was not obligated to give her a single dime. Needless to say, this did not sit well with Mom. After a particularly heated argument, she decided the solution to all her problems was to send me off to military school. She even went so far as to try to convince Dad, but luckily, he shut that idea down immediately. For those wondering why Dad never helped me set up a savings account back then, I could not tell you. I guess keeping cash at home just felt simpler at the time. Update 1: the time Mom walked straight into my door. Not long after Dad got me a safe for my money, he decided to add an extra layer of security. One weekend, while Mom and Megan were out, he installed a deadbolt lock on my bedroom door and a wall-mounted lockbox for the key. The lockbox required a combination code, which only I knew. This was all a response to Megan throwing my safe out the window the last time she could not steal from me. When Megan returned home and walked past my room, she spotted the shiny new lock. Her face immediately twisted into a scowl, and she stormed off to find Mom. Soon enough, the two of them came barreling up the stairs, looking like a pair of angry storm clouds. Dad and I were waiting. "What is that thing?" Mom demanded, jabbing her finger at the lock. "A door lock," Dad said calmly. "I know what it is," she snapped. "Why is it on his door?" "Because I am done with you letting Megan get away with stealing from him and destroying his things," Dad replied firmly. "From now on, the lock stays." Mom was practically foaming at the mouth. "He is 14. This is my house, and he cannot have a lock on his door." "This is our house," Dad shot back. "And last I checked, I pay most of the bills and the mortgage. I am tired of watching you favor Megan so much that Jake has to suffer for it." "Well," Mom huffed, "then I demand the code to the lockbox at least." Dad stared her down. "Absolutely not. You have proven I cannot trust you." Mom's face turned red with fury. She stormed back down the stairs, muttering under her breath about how unfair the whole situation was. Megan, meanwhile, stood there sulking before retreating to her room. For me, life with the lock was peaceful. I got into the habit of locking my door every time I left. I could tell Mom and Megan hated it. They often stared at me as I entered the code to the lockbox, but I made sure to block their view. They could glare all they wanted, it was my room, and for the first time, I felt secure. That was until one day, late in the month, when Megan came to my door asking for $40 to buy some video games she had her eye on. "Why do you keep coming to me for money when you never pay it back?" I asked her. "I will this time," she insisted. "I swear." "No, you will not," I replied. "You blow through your allowance every month, and you know it." She started to protest, but I cut her off. "Fine. If you are serious, let us make it official." I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote out a simple IOU contract, stating she would repay me from her next allowance. I even told her dad would need to sign as a witness. Megan glanced at the paper, then started sniffling. Moments later, she tore it in half and bolted downstairs to find Mom. "Mommy! Jake is being mean to me," she wailed. When Mom came charging into my room, I calmly explained the situation. "If you think I am wrong, you can sign the IOU too," I offered. Mom's face twisted in anger. "I do not need to sign anything. Just give her the money." "No signature, no money," I said flatly. Mom raised her hand as if to slap me but stopped mid-swing. "You are just like your father. Always needing everything in writing. I hate it." I shrugged and walked to my room, saying, "Better to be like Dad than to act like you or Megan." That comment set her off. She came charging up the stairs just as I slammed and locked my door. She did not realize the deadbolt was in place and threw herself against it with full force. The loud thud was followed by a groan of pain. I opened the door to find her on the floor, clutching her face and crying. "You did this to me, you little brat," she shouted. "You did it to yourself," I replied calmly. "You are grounded," she screamed. "Get out of my sight." Later, I called Dad to explain what had happened. He groaned in frustration but assured me I was not grounded. Still, he gave me a stern lecture about not provoking Mom and added a few extra chores to my list. All things considered, it was a small price to pay for keeping my room and money safe. After I spoke with Dad about what had happened, he sighed heavily over the phone, clearly exhausted with the situation. He assured me I was not grounded but said I was still in trouble for provoking Mom. He told me to let him handle it when he got home. Later that evening, he gave me a stern talk about knowing when to pick my battles, added a few more chores to my list, and docked my allowance for the month. In the grand scheme of things, it was a small price to pay for standing up for myself. From that day on, anytime Megan asked me for money, I insisted on an IOU. She hated the idea of putting anything in writing, which made it all the more satisfying for me. I was finally done being her personal piggy bank. Update 2: Mom's scheme to send me to military school backfires. After the last time Mom threatened to punish me, she seemed to think twice about pushing things too far. Perhaps she realized that I was no longer a scared little kid she could bully into submission. Instead, she resorted to yelling, constantly trying to assert her authority, but her threats never went beyond that. I did not let it bother me. I focused on my schoolwork, odd jobs, and saving money for a car. My 15th birthday was fast approaching, and Dad surprised me with an engine kit for my bike. "This will help you get around town," he said. "Keep saving for a car, though. A scooter would be a waste of money." I agreed with his logic and kept working toward my goal. A few days later, while cleaning the back patio after mowing the lawn, I noticed a pamphlet tucked under one of Mom's chairs. It was for a military school. A knot formed in my stomach. I had a strong feeling she was up to something. I waited until Dad got home and showed him the pamphlet. His expression darkened as he read it. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "On the patio, where Mom sits." He nodded grimly and went to confront her. "Honey, care to explain this?" he asked, holding up the pamphlet. Mom went pale. "I do not know what that is. I have never seen it before." "Really?" Dad said, raising an eyebrow. "Because it looks an awful lot like you were planning to send Jake to military school. You know I would never agree to that." Her facade crumbled, and she snapped, "He needs discipline. He locks his door, and I cannot even spank him anymore. What else am I supposed to do with a disobedient brat?" Dad's voice was calm but firm. "Jake is not the problem here. You are. You have been spoiling Megan rotten while treating him like a second-class citizen. This conversation is over. If you even try to send him away, I will make sure you regret it." "Well," she spat, "it seems this whole family just wants to strip me of any power I have left. If I am nothing, I might as well be invisible." "Stop being dramatic," Dad said. "Jake is growing up, and you need to accept that." The next morning, I caught her trying to stuff something into the trash. I waited for her to leave for work and retrieved it. It was an application for the military school, complete with forged signatures from both parents. Her attempt to copy Dad's signature was laughable at best. That evening, I showed it to Dad. He was furious but decided to let it go, assuming she had abandoned the plan. Still, he kept the application in his office, just in case. Months later, the truth about Mom's affair with her high school boyfriend came out. That was the final straw for Dad, and he filed for divorce. Shortly after, he bought a new house, and I went to live with him. The divorce moved quickly, thanks to the evidence Dad had collected. In addition to the military school application, he had proof that Mom had forged his signature on a credit card application and other documents. She knew she could face legal consequences, so she agreed to most of his terms. Mom kept the house but demanded alimony and child support since Megan chose to stay with her. The judge awarded her a modest amount, just enough to cover Megan's allowance. Mom was furious and threatened to fight for more, but Dad held the forged documents over her head, keeping her in check for years. On the day I moved out, Megan smirked and said, "Mom says I am the princess of the family, and that is why you are leaving." I laughed and replied, "You can think whatever you want. I am just glad to be free." As I walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My relationship with Megan only worsened during her weekly visits to Dad's house. Eventually, we stopped speaking altogether, and I did not bother visiting Mom's house anymore. She had turned my old room into a home office, and I had no reason to go back.